On Thanksgiving Day, my mother stood up from her seat at the head of the dining room table, the table I had bought, in the house I had paid for, surrounded by food my credit card had funded, and raised a glass of wine I had driven 40 minutes to pick up from the specialty shop she liked. And she made a toast to my brother. Not to me. Not to the woman who had funded every single item in that room, including the crystal wine glass she was holding. She looked at 32 relatives packed into the dining room and said, calm as still water, "We are so proud of Brent. He is building something real. He works hard, he provides for his family, and he is the backbone of this household." She paused just long enough for the words to land. Then she glanced at me, almost as an afterthought, and added, "Sabrina just writes checks. That is not the same thing as being present. That is not the same thing as family." The room went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then my aunt started clapping. "I am Dr. Sabrina Cross. I am a trauma surgeon at a level 1 trauma center. I have spent 11 years standing over bodies that arrived by helicopter, making split-second decisions that determined whether a stranger's family got to say goodbye or not. I have worked 80-hour weeks during residency on no sleep and granola bars, missing Christmases and birthdays, and my own father's last coherent days in the hospital because I was in someone else's operating room trying to save someone else's father." And in front of 32 people on Thanksgiving afternoon, my mother described that life as just writing checks. I set my fork down on the plate. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I had learned a long time ago that this table was not a safe place for my tears. I stood up, folded my napkin next to my plate, and said, "Excuse me," in the same voice I use when I need to step out of a trauma bay to collect myself. "Stick around, because the drive I took that evening finally cracked open a truth I had been refusing to look at for over a decade." I drove to my apartment, a one-bedroom I rented 12 minutes from the hospital because I was at work too early and too late to justify a long commute. I had been renting it for 6 years. I had not lived in the house I owned for 6 years. The house where my mother, my brother, his wife, and their 2 kids had been living, rent-free, in 4 bedrooms, with a backyard and a 2-car garage, while I slept in a rented room the size of a nice hotel suite. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex for a long time without getting out of the car. The drive had given me too much silence and too much time to remember things I had spent years actively not thinking about. I remembered the week I matched into my surgical residency program. My father pulled me into a hug that lasted too long, his hands gripping the back of my head the way they had when I was small. He whispered into my hair that he was proud of me. 3 months later, he had a stroke. He spent the next 14 months in slow decline, and I spent those 14 months working 90-hour hospital weeks and wiring money home every month so my mother didn't have to touch the savings he'd spent 30 years building. My brother was 30 years old at the time. He did not get a job. When my father died, I was in surgery. I couldn't leave. I didn't make it in time to say goodbye. At the funeral, my mother introduced me to her friends as my daughter, the doctor. She said it the way people do when they want credit for something they had nothing to do with. The house came 3 years later. My mother's rental situation had become untenable. Her landlord was selling the building, she had 60 days to find somewhere else, and she called me crying at 11 p.m. between cases. I didn't have time to think it through clearly. I had just started as an attending, my salary had finally crossed into real numbers, and I said yes before I understood what yes meant. I bought a 4-bedroom house in a good school district. I put my name on the deed. I told my mother it was hers to live in as long as she needed. I told my brother he could stay in the guest room while he got back on his feet. That was 6 years ago. My brother had never left the guest room. He had also never gotten back on his feet. He had, however, built a website for a consulting firm on my credit card, leased a BMW on a supplementary card I gave my mother strictly for groceries, and furnished the living room with pieces I had definitely not approved, using a home equity line of credit that supposedly bore my signature. I say supposedly because I had not signed anything. I hadn't opened the voicemail from my financial advisor yet. It had been sitting on my phone since Tuesday. I'd been too exhausted to deal with it. I opened it now, sitting in the dark car in my apartment parking lot. His voice was careful in the specific way that means bad news coming slowly. He said my home equity line of credit had been drawn down significantly. He said it hadn't been me making the withdrawals. He said he needed to talk to me as soon as possible. $85,000. I sat with that number in the dark until my hands stopped shaking. I called Marshall. He is a real estate and family attorney I met during my intern year. He'd been brought in to help a patient's family with a disputed estate, and we had talked in the waiting room for 2 hours about nothing and everything. We had stayed friends in the way busy people do. Texts, occasional dinners, the kind of friendship that gets real fast when things go wrong. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what I knew. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, Sabrina, your brother forged your signature on a home equity loan. I already knew, I just needed to hear someone else say it out loud. This is not a gray area, Marshall said. This is a felony. Come to my office Monday morning and bring every document that has your name on it. Bank statements, the original deed, the payoff confirmation, everything. I said I would. I hung up. I sat there a moment longer, staring up through the windshield at the underside of the parking structure. My father's voice came back to me from somewhere far off, something he used to say whenever I called him complaining about a coworker who never pulled their weight. You can't carry people who won't carry themselves. You'll just both end up on the ground. I got out of the car, walked inside, and did not sleep. Monday morning, I was at Marshall's office before my first case. He had already pulled the county records. He had already spoken to a bank fraud specialist. He spread the documents across his desk and walked me through 11 years of financial decisions I had made while exhausted and distracted and desperately wanting to believe that people who said they loved me were people worth trusting. The supplementary credit card I had given my mother for groceries carried $23,000 in charges I had never authorized. A spa in Scottsdale, a hotel in Miami I had never set foot in, a golf club membership under my brother's name. The home equity loan had been drawn down in 4 withdrawals over 8 months. $85,000 against a house I had paid off completely with 6 years of surgical income, all of it signed with my name in handwriting that was close but not mine. My brother had bought a boat. He had paid for a business development retreat at a resort in the Bahamas. He had renovated the kitchen of my house, the house I did not live in, with marble countertops I had never seen, using money I had never agreed to spend. Marshall watched me read through the last page. He didn't say anything until I put it down. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about my father's face at my medical school graduation. I thought about how he had worked 2 jobs, a machine shop during the day, a janitorial service on weekends, for the entirety of my childhood, and had never once complained, and had never asked me for anything except to do well and be decent. I thought about my brother signing my name on a loan document to buy a boat. Everything, I said. I want to do all of it. I called my bank from the parking lot outside Marshall's office. I had the supplementary cards frozen before I reached my car. My mother's card, my brother's card, every linked account, locked. I changed the passwords on my online banking. I removed them both as authorized users. The whole process took 11 minutes. Somewhere across town, in my house, my brother's card was about to stop working at whatever register he was standing at. Marshall drafted the eviction notice that afternoon. 30 days, as required under state law. I was the sole owner of the property. I had the right to reclaim it. A process server delivered the paperwork by Wednesday afternoon. I also called my life insurance provider. My mother and brother had been my listed beneficiaries since residency, when I was 27, and setting things up on autopilot between double shifts. I spent 20 minutes on the phone, removing them both. I named a foundation that funds surgical training for students from low-income families as the new primary beneficiary. I thought about my father when I made that call. He would have understood immediately. Thursday, an unknown local number called. A deputy from the county sheriff's office. She told me there had been a report filed claiming I had locked the lawful occupants out of a residence. I told her my name. I told her I was the sole owner of the property at that address, that my name was the only name on the deed, that the property had been paid off in full with documented income, and that the individuals she was referring to had been served a lawful eviction notice by a licensed attorney 3 days prior. She asked if I could provide documentation. I emailed the deed, the mortgage payoff confirmation, and the eviction paperwork to the address she gave me in under 5 minutes. She called back 20 minutes later. Her voice had shifted, quieter, more measured. She said the individuals who had filed the report might be subject to a separate investigation regarding a potentially fraudulent home equity loan. My brother had tried to have me removed from my own property. Instead, the sheriff's office was now looking at him for forgery and fraud. I thanked her, hung up, and went back to work. The next 72 hours dismantled my brother's constructed world in ways I didn't have to touch at all. His cards declined at the grocery store, the gas station, the restaurant where he apparently took imaginary clients for lunches that had never generated $1 of business. His BMW lease payment bounced. The leasing company initiated repossession proceedings. The people he had been whining and dining on my credit stopped returning his calls the moment they realized there was no more credit to spend. He had built a decade of pretending on a foundation that required my money to exist. Without it, there was nothing underneath him. My aunt called Saturday morning. She started talking before I could say hello. What you are doing to your mother and your brother is shameful, she said. Family does not do this to family, after everything they gave up for you. What did they give up? I said. She didn't answer right away. If you feel strongly about it, I said, you are welcome to take them in. My brother needs housing, my mother needs support. You've just described yourself as someone who believes in family. I'm sure your guest room is available. The line went so quiet I could hear her television in the background. That's different, she said finally. I know, I said, it always is. She hung up before I could. The following Tuesday, hospital security called up to the surgical floor. 3 civilians were at the front desk without appointments. My mother, my brother, his wife, standing slightly behind both of them with her arms crossed. I finished the case I was in. I changed out of my surgical gown. I took the elevator down to the lobby. They were standing near the reception desk, and they looked wrong in a way it took me a moment to identify. My brother was wearing clothes I had never seen, worn, creased, the kind of thing a person grabs when they have been scrambling through a week they did not plan for. His wife's hair was unbrushed. My mother looked smaller than she had at Thanksgiving. The armor was gone. My brother saw me come through the security doors and stepped forward immediately. His voice came out loud in the way voices do when they are covering for something underneath. You froze everything. Do you understand what you have done? We can't pay for anything. The kids can't. He stopped. His jaw worked. You cannot just do this. I looked at him steadily. He was 41 years old. He was shaking. I did not raise my voice. I said, you forged my signature on an $85,000 loan. You used my credit for 6 years for personal expenses without my knowledge or consent. You filed a false report with the sheriff's office claiming I had illegally locked you out of property you do not own and have never owned. His wife looked at the floor. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I want you to hear me clearly, I said. I love you, all of you, and I have spent 11 years expressing that love in the only language this family ever asked me to speak, financially. That ends now. Not because I am angry, because it was slowly destroying all of us. My brother's face crumpled in a way I had never seen before. Not anger, something that had been living behind the anger for a very long time, waiting for a wall to collapse so it could finally come through. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. His shoulders began to shake. I don't know how to do anything, he said. The words came out raw and compressed, like something that had been held under pressure for years. Every time I tried something, you were already so far ahead. I didn't know where to start. I didn't think I could catch up. I just stopped trying and started pretending. He exhaled something that wasn't quite a laugh. The boat got repossessed Wednesday, he said. I stood very still. I had known for a long time that the leased cars and the fake business cards were things built to cover an absence, not celebrate a presence. Knowing it in the abstract and hearing it spoken out loud in a hospital lobby are entirely different things. I did not open my arms, I did not reach for my wallet, I let the silence do what it needed to do. Then I said, there are 2 things I will do. One time, they are not negotiable. I would pay the legal minimum to settle the outstanding balance on the fraudulent loan, the amount that would prevent a permanent civil judgment from following him and affecting his children's financial future. Nothing beyond that. Not the boat, not the restaurant tabs, just a floor. In exchange, he had to secure a real job within 60 days. I had already looked into EMT certification programs in our county, 12 weeks, state-subsidized for qualifying applicants with a job placement rate that was actually worth something. If he completed the program and got hired, I would cover his first and last month's rent on a modest apartment. Not a house, a 1-bedroom that his salary could sustain on its own after that. For my mother, I had already located a senior housing complex with subsidized units 15 minutes from the hospital, clean, safe, appropriately sized. Her Social Security income would cover it with enough left over for basic living if she was careful with it. I would help her move. I would visit regularly. I would not be her financial safety net any longer. I would be her daughter. You told 32 people at Thanksgiving that I just write checks, I said quietly. I want to try something else. She didn't argue. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I could not immediately place. It was not gratitude, exactly. It was something closer to recognition, like she was seeing something she had been aware of for years and had simply chosen until now not to look at directly. She nodded, small, once. That was enough. Almost a year passed before I saw them again at something that felt like a family occasion. My brother had completed the EMT certification program in 11 weeks. He passed his licensing exam on the first attempt, which surprised me, and which I did not tell him surprised me. He was assigned to a station on the south side of the city, working 24-hour shifts, coming home afterward in a specific kind of exhaustion I recognized from my own residency, the good kind, the kind that comes from having used your body and your brain for something real. He had calluses on his hands now. He drove a 10-year-old pickup he had bought with his first 3 paychecks. We had Thanksgiving again, not at my house, I had sold it by then, quietly, and put the equity into an account that was mine alone. We had it at my mother's apartment in the senior complex. She had made turkey in a roasting pan that barely fit in her oven. Her dining room tables, seated 4 if you were careful about your elbows and didn't mind passing things across each other's plates. It was crowded, it was not elegant. The cranberry sauce came from a can, the rolls were slightly overdone and nobody mentioned it. I sat at that small table and watched my brother help his daughter cut her food, and I thought about my father coming home from his second job on a Friday night, still in his work shirt, sitting down without complaint, eating whatever was on the table. He always said grace before the meal, even when we were rushed, even when the food was basic. He always ended with the same line, grateful for what we have, working toward what we need. My brother looked up from across the table and caught me watching him. He held my gaze for a moment, not the way he used to, not with the smug performance of a man wearing borrowed confidence, just steadily, like someone who had stopped hiding. He looked away first. There was no toast that evening. There was no announcement about who the real backbone of the family was. My mother poured herself a small glass of wine, the kind she bought now at the grocery store, store brand, $6, and without saying anything, she poured one for me and set it down in front of my plate and went back to the kitchen to check on the rolls. That was new. I don't need it to be a grand gesture. I have spent my career in a field where the difference between someone making it and someone not making it is sometimes 1 minute, one decision made under pressure when none of the options are good. I know what survival looks like up close. It is rarely dramatic. It is usually just someone still breathing who wasn't breathing a moment before. My brother is still here, my mother is still here, I am still their family. But I am also finally my own. If you have ever been the one in your family who gave everything and still got called the selfish one for eventually stopping, if you know what it feels like to be someone's bank account before you were ever someone's child, I see you. Tell me in the comments what was the hardest thing you ever had to take back for yourself. Because sometimes the most loving thing we can do is the one that looks, from the outside, like the cruelest thing we have ever done.